Jake Paul has been making headlines as the daring amateur boxer who'd face anyone based on pure self-confidence, and that seems to be working for him too. In a shocking turn of events last year, Paul managed to raise his rank to 4-0 after a win against Tyron Woodley. But what new shocking dare will he take on next? As in, who'll be the next unlucky opponent? We have some theories. Keep watching to find out. First up, Woodley may come back for revenge. What greater humiliation than to get defeated by a YouTuber? Of course, boxer Tyron Woodley wanted a rematch as soon as he stepped out of the ring that day. In the post-fight press conference, Woodley said he was looking forward to fighting Paul again, except this time he promised that the results would be different. Paul wasn't having it though and shot back saying that the American boxer already got his chance and showed the world that he's not all that he's taken to be. But then things got a bit interesting. Paul loves drama and anything that could lead to drama. Saying it like it was a favor he would do, he told Woodley that a rematch was possible, only if the latter got a tattoo saying he loved Jake Paul. Now that's what we call a dilemma. Woodley may have wanted his sweet revenge, but no amount of gratification could be worth ruining one's precious body for Jake Paul. So a rematch against Woodley is pretty much off the table. And if you think about it, it's better this way too. Paul should be looking for a different opponent now that he's done proving he's better than Woodley. Next is Tommy Fury. There was a lot of talk about a Paul versus Fury face-off earlier this year. A contract was almost signed, but then Fury got out of it. The funniest part was Fury's older brother Tyson Fury supporting the match. But somewhere along the way, the two must have realized that they'd be stooping too low with Paul, even if Tommy is a Love Island alumnus. But nonetheless, a Fury versus Paul fight would be exciting to witness. Paul made some heavy claims when a contract was to be signed. He seemed way too sure of himself and even mocked Fury for calling himself a real boxer. Fighting Fury may finally legitimize Paul's name in the boxing community. He's a trained boxer. However, Fury was particularly unpolished when he defeated Anthony Taylor in the most underwhelming manner possible. That could be the reason why Paul's so confident he can easily take him down inside the ring any day. Now we have Conor McGregor. Another exciting prospect for Paul is the UFC superstar Conor McGregor. Paul has long shown interest in joining the UFC club of fighters whom he looks up to and even supports the rights of. It doesn't get better than facing the Notorious himself for any aspiring fighter. He's the UFC's real deal and can bring instant fame to whoever he crushes inside the octagon. And as thrilling as this might be for Paul, he does realize that a fight may only take place down the road. He understands how filled up McGregor's schedule is and said in his own words, "Conor McGregor has a lot more to focus on than just me right now. I'm 5 wins in a row, victory in his 4 pro fights and 1 amateur fight. He's won 3 in the past 4 years." That may make him sound like a jerk, but what Paul simply meant was how McGregor has his own battles to fight before he can consider giving Paul a hard time. And that does ring true. So this isn't a fight that's happening anytime soon. If it does happen though, it goes without saying that the odds will be in McGregor's favor. The Irishman simply has more experience, especially as an MMA fighter, to be able to take on Paul easily. Oh, and by the way, McGregor himself is pretty confident about facing a newbie such as Paul. Up next, Jorge Masvidal. When Paul versus Woodley was yet to happen, the UFC beast Jorge Masvidal had already decided whom he was supporting, and it wasn't Paul. The YouTuber turned boxer just couldn't stand anyone not supporting him and challenged the MMA legend himself to a fight. He said he would love to take it up with him inside the octagon, and that throwing jabs indirectly just doesn't suit a dignified fighter like himself. So will the fight actually take place? There's no doubt that such a match could pull some serious pay-per-view revenue, but nothing has been confirmed yet. If Paul trash-talked Masvidal enough, maybe he'd be angered into fighting him one-on-one. And now all the times Paul has trash-talked elite names in the UFC. It may be his years-old YouTube channel that has inflated his ability to trash-talk people much stronger and better than him, but one thing's for sure, there's absolutely nothing Paul enjoys doing more. Over the period that he's been involved with the world of fighting sports, he's targeted several experienced men. Let's have a look. Starting with the UFC president himself. In the most controversial move ever, Paul decided to go after UFC president Dana White. Now, he claimed that he simply supported the fighters who are mistreated at the hands of the organization, as in they don't get even basic rights like healthcare, insurance, and fair pay. But in voicing his concerns, Paul took some very extreme steps that had people doubting his real intentions. He released a full-blown diss track that called White out on his unfair policies. He even made an entire skit that showed White and his business partners as villains who withhold the perks that their fighters deserve for going through all the trouble that comes with professional fighting. But many weren't convinced. They thought Paul only did it because White had repeatedly refused to give him a fight against one of his fighters, Kamaru Usman. Paul's ego was probably the biggest when he won that fight against Woodley, and he milked the win to the fullest. In an interview, he names many UFC fighters who he thought would also be easy targets during face-offs. And believe it or not, the welterweight champion Kamaru Usman was one of them. Apparently, Paul thinks he'd humiliate the MMA beast in a fight. He called on President White to arrange a match against Usman and several other UFC big games, saying that he promises to embarrass them just like he'd embarrassed Woodley. The other fighters that he named were McGregor, Masvidal, and Nate Diaz. Man's got some serious guts. Next, Michael Bisping. Among the victims of Paul's passionate trash-talking sessions is the retired MMA fighter Michael Bisping. In a recent conversation with the press, Paul said it'd be a silly call-out to name Bisping as someone whom he'd be able to defeat easily. He said that'd be an easy fight for him because the retired fighter is old now. Now, it was Bisping who started this by calling the 25-year-old out on his audacity, but Paul decided to take it a step further by challenging him to a fight. He once again went on a rant about all the UFC fighters being cowards who were too scared to face him inside the ring. But when Daniel Cormier noted that one fighter who may be available to fight isn't being pursued by Paul, there was some real silence. So maybe Paul is just bark and no bite. Now, in other UFC news, Tom Aspinall names the greatest UFC fighter and the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time. Tom Aspinall is just another UFC fighter who thinks Georges St. Pierre is the absolute GOAT. So what got him to admit this? The 29-year-old recently put on the best performance of his UFC career against Alexander Volkov. The first-round submission earned him a Performance of the Night award and had fans singing out his name outside the O2 Arena. But the greatest highlight of the win was him being appreciated by his idol, Georges St. Pierre. Talking to the media, Aspinall mentioned that on a photograph following the win, Pierre commented how awesome Aspinall's performance was. He was called by the Hall of Famer the greatest UFC fighter of all time. When he was questioned on that, he said he completely believes in what he said, and that there's been no one like Pierre to ever grace the UFC fighters roster. He said, quote, "This is what I think. To be the greatest of all time, this is gonna sound like madness, but GSP first of all did it in 2 weight divisions. Also, GSP had some bad losses and came back. To me, that is a sign of a real champion," unquote. Then, he also named another fighter as the best heavyweight fighter in the UFC. According to the English fighter, it's none other than Stipe Miocic. Miocic held the heavyweight championship title twice and still competes in the heavyweight division of the organization. He also thinks that the legend deserves a rematch against Francis Ngannou. Miocic has actually been called the GOAT more than one time. In fact, he's famous for his incredible fighting abilities that have pushed him to such great heights within UFC. That was it for today's video. Who do you want to see Jake Paul facing next? Let us know in the comments below. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, where we post similar videos quite frequently. We'll see you in the next one.